Hello everybody. Welcome. I can see already in the comments that some of you are here already. I hope you're doing well. I'm Romina. I work for Macmillan Education. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to today's session. I'll just wait a little bit so that everyone can be here. Hello, I can see lots of comments. So today's session will be about using mother tongue in the English classroom, and our speaker will be Jonathan Hadley. So welcome, Jonathan. Hello,
Thank
how
you.
are you?
Hello, very well, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So today, Jonathan will be speaking about using mother tongue in the English classroom. Before passing on to him, I just wanted to say a couple of things that are more technical. So I'll just switch to Italian for a second and then I'll pass it over to Jonathan so that you can enjoy the session. Ancora buongiorno a tutti, grazie mille per essere qua alla sessione di Macmillan Education Time Using Mother Tongue in the English Classroom. Vi dicevo appunto che ho un paio di dettagli tecnici da dirvi prima della sessione. Allora, innanzitutto potete scrivere tutte le vostre domande nei commenti, quindi poi con Jonathan avrete anche delle belle conversazioni, speriamo. Poi abbiamo la parte sugli attestati, che di solito è molto popolare. Gli attestati saranno disponibili già dai prossimi giorni nel sito mondadorieducation.it e nella sezione appunto attestati. Potrete anche visionare le slide. Invece, per chi vedrà questo evento in differita, ricordiamo semplicemente che l'attestato sarà disponibile solo ai partecipanti che avranno effettuato l'accesso dall'email di conferma entro la mezzanotte di oggi. Per quanto riguarda invece la registrazione, sarà disponibile a questo stesso link. So, thank you very much. And Jonathan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Romina. Hello and good afternoon to everybody. I'm delighted to be with you all today. It's great to see so many teachers who have registered, and a big hello to anybody who was with me earlier in the year when I was giving some teacher training in Italy. Today, as Romina said, I'm going to be talking about using mother tongue in the English classroom. Is it harmful or is it helpful? We're just going to bring the slides up onto the screen. Thank you. So my name's Jonathan Hadley, and just to let you know, I'm here in Wales in the UK. I've been an English teacher for almost 30 years now, and for the last 10, 15 years, I've been helping to support English colleagues all around the world with teacher training. Here are the aims of today's session. So we're going to look at the use of mother tongue, and I'll refer to this in future probably as L1, the first language. And we're going to evaluate whether it's useful or not in the English classroom. And if it is useful, we're going to identify when it might be most effective. And because I'm a teacher and I know you're teachers, you probably want to know about practical usage of mother tongue. So I'm going to focus very much on practical activities when we can perhaps use the mother tongue in the English classroom. There will be an opportunity for questions towards the end of my presentation, but as Romina said, you've got the comments box. I'll try and keep an eye on that. We'll collect any questions that come as well. And I'll try and deal with those questions at the end. Throughout my presentation, though, I'm going to ask you some specific questions, and I'd be grateful if you could reply using the comment box feature. Before we start, I think I should just check what I mean by mother tongue or L1. I'm assuming in your context that the mother tongue for all your students is Italian, but that might not be the case. You might have some students who have recently arrived in Italy, There might be some immigrants or refugees in your classes for whom Italian is a second or possibly third language. So I think it's just always worth considering as the teacher, do we know what the mother tongue of our students is? It may be Italian, but equally Italian may not be their first language. So whatever we say in Italian might not always help them. Just something to keep in the back of our minds. So looking at this topic, I think it's very important to consider the context in which we're teaching. And everybody will be coming from a different language background, teaching background, education background. So I thought we'd focus first of all on you, yourselves, when you learned English, if you learned English as a second language. I've put a statement on the screen. When I studied English, my teacher used L1. So did your English teacher, when you were a student, did he or she use Italian frequently, sometimes, rarely, or never? Can you just put your answer in the comment box, please? I can see someone's put frequently. Thank you. We do have somebody who's put, Anna's put never used Italian, right? Lots and lots of frequently's coming through. I'd have to say when I studied foreign languages at school, and for me that was French and Spanish, my teacher, I think, used English a lot, maybe not frequently, perhaps sometimes. And I also studied Arabic at university in the UK. And again, the teachers who were teaching me Arabic, they sometimes, possibly often, used English to help me. So they didn't see any problem in using the mother tongue to support me in my studies. We'll look at this a little bit more in detail in a moment. Right, the next bit of context. Now let's have a look at your English classes where you are the teacher. The sentence on the screen, my students use mother tongue in my English lesson. Again, can you choose, do they use Italian frequently, sometimes, rarely, or never? Or if they don't use Italian, do they use their mother tongue frequently, sometimes, rarely, or never? Lots of frequently's, and I can see somebody's put unfortunately frequently. Capital letters frequently, I'm assuming that means that they do a lot of Italian speaking in the classroom. Yeah, probably no surprise if I asked this question in many other countries, I would get a similar response. Moving on to the next one, thinking of you as the teacher. The sentence this time says, I give my students some resources in mother tongue. And here I'd like to just take a moment to think about this word resources. What do I mean about resources? Well, I'm thinking of things like you have a dictionary that might be Italian English. You might give them a glossary. So you can see on the screen an example of a glossary. If they have a reading text at the bottom of the reading text, you give them a few words from that text, which you translate. You might get them to use a grammar book, or they might have a grammar book that's written in Italian with English examples. Or perhaps when you're showing them a film or a TV clip, you put on Italian subtitles while they're watching it and listening to it in English. Or you might give them an article or a video clip on a similar topic or theme to the one you're studying in English, but the article or video clip is in Italian. Or you might have on your classroom walls some charts or posters with vocabulary, keywords, grammar points that are written in both English and Italian. So back to that statement. I give my students resources in their mother tongue. Would you put frequently, sometimes, rarely, or never? Okay, there's a bit more of a variety of answers coming through here. So we've got sometimes, we've got quite a lot of rarely coming through. sort of change in perception as to whether it's appropriate to use Italian here or not. And I can see one comment, it depends on the activity, okay? And my last statement, this is something we also have to consider. The policy of our school, or perhaps from the ministry. Is there a teaching policy in your school where you should either use Italian or not use Italian in your English lessons? Are you given complete freedom, or is there some message that comes from your supervisors, heads of department, from the school administration? Please complete the sentence. We've got a few "it depends" coming through, okay? Some people don't have a policy, right? It's a slightly controversial topic, whether we should or shouldn't use mother tongue in the classroom. So I thought it would be useful to just reflect on perhaps where this comes from. Why do people have strong views one way or another? So the question I've got on the screen is why, if we think it's a good idea, why should we ban the first language? And if there is a policy in your school or from your ministry that you shouldn't be using Italian, why do the people who wrote that policy have it? A couple of thoughts that come to my head about this. I think originally there may have been a reaction to a methodology that was very common before the 1980s, and that would have been grammar translation, where a lot of the class was looking at sentences in English, translating them into Italian, and then vice versa. And with the communicative language approach appearing in the 80s and 90s, a sort of reaction to using that. I also think it's a reaction to teachers, perhaps in some contexts, overusing mother tongue in the classroom. Perhaps some senior leaders, supervisors have come into classrooms and they've heard a lot of Italian and they think, gosh, this is an English lesson. There should be a lot more English in it, so we should ban the use of Italian. Or possibly it's also an effect of first language acquisition theories. The idea that when a child learns the mother tongue, they're surrounded by that language for 24/7, so every hour of every day of every week. And the idea has been then taken into second language learning, second language acquisition, that if that's how a child learns their first language, maybe that's how a second language learner also should learn the language. But of course, we now kind of know that how a child learns their mother tongue is not how a second language learner learns a second language, because that learner is usually older and already has language skills and linguistic abilities, and they're coming with more tools than a child would. And as we know, our students aren't surrounded by English for all that time, so they're not going to be just picking up English as an English native speaker child would. It may also be that in the methodology that's written, where people say don't use the mother tongue, that the people who write those books or give those lectures, they themselves are working in a multilingual environment. Perhaps they're working in the UK or in America or in Australia, where their classes are multilingual. So it's not much use choosing one mother tongue, because every student in the class will have a different mother tongue. And it can often be the case that native speakers who perhaps say you shouldn't use the mother tongue, they themselves are monolingual and they themselves don't have another foreign language to use. So they can't call upon another language in their classrooms. I think all these perhaps have been factors in why at some periods, perhaps in the last 10, 15 years, it was thought that using the mother tongue was inappropriate. But have things changed? Was it ever realistic to ban the mother tongue in the classroom? I'd comment here that really using mother tongue is just a tool, like any other tool, an IT tool, a technology tool, that we can use well in the English classroom or we can use badly. And just as extreme as banning the use of mother tongue would be using the mother tongue all the time in the English classroom. We need to find a balance, and we need to be able to use the mother tongue perhaps carefully and with good justification. I'd also say that nowadays, a lot of goals that we have as educators is to make our students bilingual or biliterate, so that they're comfortable in 2 languages or possibly more than 2 languages. And if that is our goal, then we need to show that we equally value the mother tongue as much as English in our classes. And we need to give the students the skills that they need to operate comfortably in 2 or more languages themselves. And interestingly, I think this is now being emphasized more by the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, the CEFR, that comes from the Council of Europe. And I've taken this little paragraph from the section on plurilingual competence. In the last few years, the Council of Europe have put a lot more emphasis on students having the ability to use 2 or more languages effectively and efficiently. And the section I've chosen comes from the updated companion volume to the CEFR, which was produced and updated in April 2020, so just 3 years ago. And here you can see from the key points that are on the screen that the CEFR now places even more emphasis on our students being multilingual, plurilingual, and they give detailed descriptors as to how this can be achieved. So you'll see on the screen that they recommend that our students should be able to switch from one language or dialect to another. So that would imply that they can go from Italian to English and back the other way as well. They should be able to express themselves in one language and understand somebody speaking another language. They should also be able to call upon the knowledge of a number of languages. So they should be calling upon all language skills that they have. Also on the right-hand side, you'll see it says, bring the whole of one's linguistic equipment into play. And by linguistic equipment, I would mean, therefore, your knowledge, your skills, your ability, your vocabulary, your grammar, in both English and in a mother tongue as well. So I think there's good justification there coming from the Council of Europe. So the key question that we face as English teachers, therefore, if we are not banned from using mother tongue, we then have to ask ourselves whether we should use it or not use it. And if we are using the mother tongue in the classroom, perhaps we have to ask ourselves the key question, well, why am I using Italian at this moment? Can I justify the reason for doing it? And I think there are good justifications for using the mother tongue. But equally, I think we have to bear in mind the amount of exposure that our students get to English. Outside the classroom, outside the school, how much English do they have around them? They might watch quite a lot of English on television or at the movies. They might listen to English pop songs, but the type of English they're being exposed to might be quite narrow. So perhaps as the English teacher, it is our responsibility to try to maximize the amount of English that takes place in the classroom. After all, students can learn a lot from classroom English, from just listening to the teacher using English, speaking English. This might be a kind of receptive acquisition of the language, but that's equally powerful. So if we don't use much English in the classroom, perhaps we are preventing our students from significant exposure to English. And if they don't get it in the English classroom, when else are they possibly going to get it? But yes, I would argue, and this is the kind of main theme of my webinar, I do believe that there is a place for the mother tongue, for Italian, in the English classroom, provided we can justify it and we have a good reason for using it. So for the rest of the webinar, we'll look at when it might be reasonable to use the mother tongue and when there might be other options when we can avoid using Italian. Well, the first usage of mother tongue, I would say, is with classroom management. Mother tongue can help us to build a good rapport or relationship with our students. If we sometimes make jokes in the mother tongue connected to the topic, if we try and encourage and engage our students by sometimes using a little mother tongue in the classroom, that can build up their engagement and motivation in using English themselves. And again, I go back to the idea that we just need to find this balance. But I think throwing in a little bit of Italian can get the students feeling that, yes, we do value their mother tongue and that there are appropriate times in the classroom for it to be used. Often, mother tongue is used when it comes to giving instructions in the classroom. Now, this perhaps is a little bit more controversial. Is it necessary for us to give all our instructions in Italian? What do you think? I'll have a pause here. Any comments you'd like to make about giving instructions in the mother tongue? Good idea? Bad idea? Or it depends? Please write any comments in the box. Thank you. I can see some comments coming through. So quite mixed comments here, which is not surprising. And a lot of it depends. And I'm assuming here, perhaps it depends on the instructions, it depends on the activity, it depends on the level of the students. I can see if somebody says if it's a routine activity, then students should be able to understand routine instructions given in English. And yes, I can see it depends on the level of our students. One comment I'd make here is if you believe in giving instructions in a mix of English and Italian, I think there's a problem with that. If you give the instructions first in English and then you repeat them in Italian, I imagine that many students will switch off with the English and then switch on with the Italian. So they won't listen to the English because they know that the teacher will be repeating it in Italian. So I'm not sure that using both languages is suitable at that point. I'd like to bring up the point made about routines. If it's a routine instruction, then surely we could give that in English, provided that we're sure that our students understand it. I think what it means is that as the teacher, we need to make sure that the English we use when giving instructions is simple, effective, and most importantly of all, understood by our students. I can see some people have got suggestions as to how we can do instruction giving in English, and that was really my next point here. If we're not going to use Italian, then how can we make our instructions clear? I know some comments have said things like giving a hint, giving an example, giving a demonstration. Those would all be extremely useful. And I think that's the important part here. Why not just give instructions in English, but support those instructions with scaffolding, with extra help, with extra hints? And those might be that you give a demonstration of the activity as you're giving the instructions, so students can visually see what they have to do. You might want to demonstrate the activity with a stronger student in the class who can role play with you the activity and the rest of the class watch so that they can see what they have to do in pairs or in groups. We can use visuals, pictures, images to support the language of our instructions. And above all, I think it's important just to simplify the instructions, simplify the English. Don't speak a lot of English, but break it down into very short, sequenced, logical, direct commands. Maybe breaking up the commands, give them a couple of instructions, they carry that out, then come back and give them further instructions. If you speak for a long time in English with lots of instructions, that will probably go over their heads and they won't understand what they're doing. Also, we can check instructions by asking instruction checking questions. Are you going to work in pairs? Are you going to write in English? Are you going to write one word or two words? Are you going to speak with your friends or with a group of people? So you can ask them questions and then find out from their replies whether they've actually understood the instructions in English. So here I'd argue that I think for almost all activities, we'd be better giving them in English with support, making sure that the language we use is at the right level for our students. Of course, if your students are very, very weak or at the early stages of learning, then you might decide that actually giving mother tongue is a useful support, and you can reduce the amount of mother tongue as the days and the weeks continue. Again, it depends very much on your teaching context, and what might work for one teacher may not be appropriate for another. Instead of just focusing on us, the teachers, using mother tongue in the classroom, I think, of course, the reality is that our students will be using mother tongue in the classroom too. So my question here then is, well, why does this happen? Why do our students perhaps frequently use Italian? Because they want to, they hate English, or are there other reasons behind it? Back to you in the comment box. Why do you think your students use mother tongue, if they do, in the English classroom? Okay, some interesting comments coming through. I can see that it's easier for them. Okay, so they prefer to use their mother tongue because they can then give the information that they want to. I'm seeing a few comments about lazy, so it's kind of blaming them. Again, I'd have a question mark about that. Perhaps some students are, but I'd like to think most of my students have a bit more motivation, but maybe not. Interesting to see this sort of shy lack of confidence. They're afraid, they feel ashamed because perhaps they feel their English is too weak, so then they don't want to use English. I think those are all very realistic comments and reasons why students might go into their mother tongue. And if those are the case, then perhaps that's something we as the teacher need to focus on, and we need to try and help them with it. We need to encourage an atmosphere where if they make mistakes in English, nobody laughs at them, nobody faults them, but they are praised and encouraged, even if the English is weak or wrong or not suitable, that we value the input that they're trying to give in a second language, and acknowledging that it's difficult to speak or write in a second language. Of course, if they speak to the teacher in the mother tongue, then we, the teacher, can perhaps respond in English and encourage them to use English as well. We don't have to respond in the mother tongue. If they talk to each other in Italian, well, perhaps there's a reason for that, and it's not just easy or laziness. Perhaps it's because they don't actually have the language that they need. So have we done our job properly? Have we given them the ideas, the content? Have we given them the vocabulary, perhaps the grammar that they need in order to be able to speak or write? Maybe they would like to use English, but they just don't have the skills yet. So have we built up in the class the language that they will require in order to speak or write? This might involve then giving them the types of phrases, sentence starters, language prompts that will be useful for the activity. Above all, perhaps we need to teach them classroom English so that they're not asking very simple questions like, can you repeat that? Can I go to the toilet in Italian? But they actually have the classroom language in English. And those types of phrases, we need to teach them. We need to practice, perhaps at the beginning of a term. And we could put them in their notebook or on the wall as wall charts so that we can remind them when they start using this type of language in Italian, we point and get them to repeat it in English. So I'm kind of, very concerned as the teacher, can my students actually do the activity in English? Do they have the language, the skills, the knowledge? And if they don't, then it's not realistic to expect them to come out with English, and they probably will fall back on their mother tongue. So that goes into the planning of my lesson. Have I planned the stages of my lesson so that it builds up to the activity and that they have the language that they need? Now let's have a look at using the mother tongue when it comes to learning vocabulary or teaching vocabulary. Is it something that perhaps they should know, the equivalent in their mother tongue when they are learning new words and phrases? You'll see some examples here from the Macmillan Education series Upskill. I've taken examples from book 2, where English and Italian are given on the page. So the authors certainly do believe that there is a place for Italian, mother tongue, in the textbook to support the students. It appears both as a vocabulary box. You can see the unit on holidays has types of holiday, and they have some useful phrases on the left in English, and then the equivalent in Italian. What's useful here is showing to the students that in English we use the word go, but in Italian it's not always the word go. You do have andare, but there are some other words that the better translation would be. So encouraging students not to just translate word for word. We also have the glossary. So at the end of a reading or a listening, key words from that text are given in Italian. And also at the back of the book, there is a word list. I've given you an example for the letter H. Words starting with H and their Italian equivalent. So is it a good idea? Yes, basically is what I would say. The students do need to know how the new words and phrases are given in or are translated in their mother tongue. But of course, just knowing the translation is not sufficient. There are other things that our students need to know when they are learning new vocabulary. So they've seen the English, they perhaps come across the translation. My question to you for the comment box, please. What other things do students need to know about new vocabulary, apart from translating it into mother tongue? What other things do we need to know? Great, thank you. Collocation, so how words fit together. So going beyond the individual word into chunks and phrases. Great, yes, when to use the words. So can they put the words and phrases into a sentence, both in speaking and writing? Patrizia, thank you. Pronunciation, good. So they need to understand the meaning. They need to be able to pronounce it. They need to know, right, how to spell it, how to form the word for writing. They need to be able to use it in an example, and certainly giving them pictures. Some words, there are pictures that are equivalent, can help them. Context, exactly. Do they know whether this word is appropriate in this context? Is it a business word, a general English word? Do they know the register? Is it a formal word or an informal word? Is it something that we'd use in a formal situation or only with our friends? So yes, context, as I can see in the box, you're writing that comment, is extremely important. But translation is one of those. You may have heard of the researcher Paul Nation. He's from the University of Wellington in New Zealand. He has focused all his life on vocabulary, and one of the most important things I've learned from Paul Nation's research is that for students to really acquire a new word or a new phrase, they have to experience it somewhere between 9 and 20 times. If they only come across the word once, it goes in one ear and it comes out the other. They need to read the word, listen to the word, write the word, say the word, and indeed be able to have an equivalent in the mother tongue, at least 9 up to maybe 20 experiences of this for that word to stick in their heads. So knowing the translation of it can certainly be one of those experiences. But again, stressing here that it's important when we focus on translation that we're not translating word for word. We're encouraging our students to look at the meaning of the whole phrase and coming up with an appropriate translation for it in the mother tongue. So my question here then, looking at some vocabulary, skiing, government, and the phrase in my spare time. If we don't choose to use Italian to give the translation, how else could we teach those words? Let's have a look at the word skiing. How would you get students to understand the meaning of skiing? Well, perhaps a simple way of doing that would be to show them a picture of somebody who's skiing. Some words naturally lend themselves to pictures, and therefore they don't need an Italian equivalent. But the next word, government, that's a bit more challenging. Is it possible to find a picture of government? Probably not. Have a think about that. How could you teach the word government if you didn't use Italian? Any ideas in the comment box? I guess here it comes back to what do we understand by the meaning government? I think even in Italian, you might have more than one word for it. I'm not very good at Italian, I'm afraid, but I looked it up and I found the word governo and amministrazione. Apologies for my pronunciation, which implies that there are different interpretations of the word, as there are in English. Perhaps I'd focus on the meaning of government as in the people who are in charge of making the laws, collecting taxes. And I might show a chart of the Prime Minister and the ministers and the people who work in the body that we refer to as government. So I might, use a video or a photo, I can see people suggesting that, of those individuals. But of course, that would just be one interpretation of the word government. Government can also be the activity or the system. So it depends very much what we mean. And again, we'd be teaching our students the importance that when they translate, that they get the correct translation. And the last one is a phrase, in my spare time. The word spare is the word that would be new to my students. It has the same meaning as in my free time, but is a higher level, and I'd be encouraging my higher level students to be using it. And for this, I might set up a context or a situation about last week in my spare time when I wasn't at work, I wasn't teaching, I was at home with my family. We went shopping, we went to the cinema, we went to a restaurant. I'd give them the context, the situation, examples of activities that we often do in our spare time. So again, that oral story could help explain the phrase rather than just going straight for an Italian translation. Likewise, the question arises when we're teaching grammar. Is it the time for us to use Italian when we are giving an explanation? And should we be explaining grammar? Is it effective to give an explanation even if it's in the mother tongue? Explanations are quite long, perhaps quite boring. Will our students listen to us? Will they switch off? Will they understand even if we use Italian? Do they know Italian terms for grammar? Does that make any sense to them? Well, again, it's finding a balance. In the upskill book, we certainly have sections where there are grammar and the information is given in Italian with examples in English. So perhaps some of the time for some of our students, it is useful. But there are other things that we can do in order to teach grammar or to help our students understand it. And I was thinking of an example here of perhaps grammar that you might teach. Here's a sentence. If I'd studied hard, I would have passed my exam. This is an example of the third conditional, isn't it? Unreal. If I had studied, if I had studied, I would have passed. I could just translate that into Italian, but perhaps there are other things that we should consider doing with our students. In this particular example, again, I think context is everything. I would give an example of it. I would perhaps tell them a story and say, you know, last month I went shopping, I went to parties, I went on holiday, I had a great time, lots of fun, I did lots and lots of things, but I forgot to give enough time for my studies. I didn't even spend one day studying. And what happened? I failed my exam. Oh no, I failed my exam. And then I'd ask them, well, why did I fail my exam? And of course, because I didn't study hard. And then I give them the imaginary example of, oh, if I could change the past, what would I need to change? Was it good to go partying? Was it good to go on holiday? No. Good to study. So let's just imagine if I could change the past. If I'd studied hard, I would have passed my exam. And then I'd come up with lots of examples of this type of formula. If I had plus past participle, would have plus past participle. And I'd give more examples and I'd get students to work it out. And hopefully they'd come up with the rules and the pattern themselves in a kind of guided discovery context. So I can get my students to work out the rules by giving them different situations, or I could get them to read it in a context or listen to it in a context, or perhaps as the teacher, I just give them the story. So context with grammar is everything. And I think it helps us to avoid long explanations. And long explanations inevitably, probably, have to be in their mother tongue. So let's try and avoid explanation. Let's try and avoid the mother tongue if possible. And we can again support by giving pictures that match the grammar, giving them perhaps timelines that show them when certain events happened. All these are imaginary, they're unreal, so we can use kind of simple English to explain what is quite complex grammar. I would argue, though, that there is a time when it's useful to contrast mother tongue and English. And again, in the Upskill book, we have examples of this, and I've chosen two for the screen. Examples particularly where the mother tongue is different from English, and we can draw our students' attention to that. In the phrase, everybody is tired, in English it's singular, but I believe in Italian it's not singular. When we have the phrase nothing new, nothing good, nothing new, something good, you have to add the word of in Italian. So we can just draw our students' attention to that. And looking at this word could on the right-hand side, there is perhaps one translation in Italian for most examples of the word could, but I notice when we are talking about ability, in Italian you use a different word, which perhaps reflects knowing how to do something rather than ability. And again, I think that's a useful point to draw our students' attention to. So, grammar, vocabulary, hopefully we've dealt with when it's appropriate to use mother tongue or not. But what about the productive skills of speaking and writing? Can we, should we use Italian in a speaking lesson or in a writing activity? What do you think? I'll pause here. Any comments in the comment box about a speaking or writing activity? Is there a place for Italian? Thank you for the comments that are coming through. Again, it's interesting to see that there is a range of views. As with so many of these questions, the answer is often it depends, both on the activity and the level of your students and the purpose of the activity. For me, in a speaking and writing lesson, one of the challenges for my students often is the ideas, the content. Do they know what they want to speak about or write about? Do they have ideas? And perhaps it can be useful for them to just brainstorm or explore in their mother tongue ideas and content before they need to then give it in English. If I just get them to speak English immediately, it might be that the English is not the problem, it's that they just don't know what to say. They lack the content. But I agree with the comments where it says a little or try not to use it. Yeah, as much as possible, we need to be maximizing English. But perhaps if there is a space for using the mother tongue, then it might be as a support, a scaffolding, help perhaps for our weaker students as well. Here are some comments that I come up with when I think about this question. If we are to value the mother tongue as much as English, then this phrase translanguaging you might have come up with. The idea that students naturally are somewhere on a journey between their mother tongue and acquiring a second language, and that it is acceptable for them to be able to use sometimes the mother tongue along that journey. If we want them to be comfortable and fluent in at least two languages, then there are going to be moments when the second language and the first language perhaps appear mixed together. Perhaps the mother tongue is used at a certain stage and the English is left to an output stage. So for inputs, maybe my students are comfortable to just quickly talk in the mother tongue to generate ideas, and then they can explain those ideas to the teacher in English or to their friends. A practical example of this might be if I want them to do a role play, could they perhaps quickly do that role play in their mother tongue so that they feel confident in the scenario, the situation, and they know what they want to talk about? And then I give them time to prepare and practice in English before they then perhaps demonstrate the role play in English themselves. So trying to use a very short moment in the lesson where they get to use the mother tongue just to feel confident, knowing what they want to talk about in that role play. And again, in the upskill book, we have some instructions given in the mother tongue about how to carry out a role play. And you can see the example I've put on the screen. So the students might just quickly do that in Italian. And then we say, right, enough Italian. Now let's move on to English. How would you do the same thing in English? And I give them the prompts, the sentence starters, the key phrases. And you can see the box from the upskill book on the screen where the English phrases which are appropriate for that role play are given. So mother tongue is just in the initial preparation stages, and we then build on that to generate output in English. Another activity that can be useful if we value translation is back translation. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's the idea that you can give students a model text that has the language and phrases that you want them to produce in English. You can give them that as a reading model, get them to understand that model text in English, and then ask them to translate it into their mother tongue. The example I've chosen here from Upskill 2 focuses on present simple for daily routines. That's the focus of my writing. So I get them then to translate all that into Italian. I then remove the English, and I ask them in step 3, only using their Italian translation, to back translate, to translate it back into English and rewrite it. So I'm hoping they will now produce those present simple verbs with the difficult S in the third person. So it's getting them to use their translation and then focusing them back into English. And the final stage would be getting them to compare what they wrote with the original. So it's using the mother tongue as a tool, a useful tool for writing. It's not something I do every writing class, but occasionally, sometimes. And I might even sometimes just give them a few moments in the English lesson just to speak in their mother tongue if they feel tired or exhausted using English. Why not? Perhaps we can give them a short break. Also, if you have the mother tongue of your students, you might occasionally get stuck in the lesson and you feel you're not moving forwards. If mother tongue is going to quickly unstick that lesson and allow you to move on to more English, then why not just use a quick bit of mother tongue to progress the lesson? And another useful activity I find is students watching something in English and hearing something in English, but reading the subtitles in their mother tongue. That can have, I think, quite a powerful way of acquiring the language that they're hearing and understanding. I know when I lived in Japan, I used to watch Japanese television with English subtitles, and I could then see how the phrases in Japanese matched the English phrases, and I felt that my Japanese progressed quite well with that. So, using mother tongue at appropriate moments with justification. I think translation and interpreting is an important skill that our students need to have. And again, in Upskill, we have certain small boxes where we ask them to take the Italian and then say it in English. Something I call a buzz group. If I've been speaking in English, I then pause and I get them in their groups to quickly buzz in Italian. What did they understand? What did they comprehend from what I said? And then feed back to me in English or feed back to another group in English. Likewise, in a discussion group, if I want them to speak English, occasionally I give a free pass. I give them a card that says, you can use mother tongue for 30 seconds. And they can use that free pass at any point in the discussion when they feel they'd like to go for 30 seconds into the mother tongue. And I often have one person in the group whose job it is to monitor how much mother tongue is being used. And their job is also to encourage the group to use as little mother tongue as possible. Final questions I'm asking here then. Is it really necessary for us to use mother tongue throughout the lesson? When we're planning each stage of the lesson, perhaps we need to reflect on that. Should I be using mother tongue for instructions? Should I be using it in the speaking activity? And as I'm planning my lesson, I try to think when it might be appropriate or inappropriate to be using the first language. This will be asking myself the question, how am I going to introduce the topic or activity without using mother tongue? How am I going to present the vocabulary or grammar without using the mother tongue, or possibly supporting the English in more appropriate ways? And those transitions from one activity to another, how can I smoothly go from one activity to another using English rather than falling back onto the mother tongue? Ideally, I will do all stages of the lesson in English, but there may be appropriate moments when some or a little mother tongue could be used. So I leave you with this final thought. Reflect now on how much mother tongue, how much Italian do you actually use in your lesson? If you don't use any at all, perhaps you might want to reflect and think whether some Italian could be useful. If you use a lot of Italian in the classroom, equally, you now might want to reflect and think, perhaps I should be using less. Perhaps I should consider some of those strategies or techniques for reducing my dependence and my students' dependence on Italian. Okay, enough talking probably from me. Any questions that people have, if they'd like to write them in the comment box. If you've had questions that I haven't answered, I'm sure my colleagues have been keeping an eye on the comment box, and perhaps they can pass them to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. It was extremely interesting. And I actually was looking at some questions. There's one question that I think it could be really interesting because it's about back translation, so the exercises that you were suggesting, and they were asking in the comments if it's still up to date in your opinion, or if there are ways that are innovative as well, just to...
I think it is up to date. As I said at the beginning, it's really it's a tool, isn't it? The mother tongue is a tool that we can use sometimes. It Back translation is something that I only use occasionally. I often use it with students perhaps who are weaker with the topic, or the first time my group of students do this writing activity where they need a little bit more support. And that word scaffolding I've been using, that sort of support we have in a building, in building their writing. I might use back translation first of all, but then come back to the same type of genre of writing at a later stage where I don't use mother tongue at any point. So try it, see if it helps some of your perhaps less confident students. Perhaps it helps them in the early stages of writing, but it's certainly not something I use all the time. I think it's as innovative and useful now as it was when it was first done, many years ago.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I saw that there are also other interesting questions. One was about, when you were explaining all the different strategies in order to maybe avoid using Italian. And someone mentioned the multisensory method. So something that is maybe a sort of innovative thing to do. What do you think about that? Is it
I think helping students to acquire language through many different senses, many different ways, many different experiences is vital, because we know our students all learn in different ways. So if we can approach that teaching or approach their learning through different routes, that's perfect. Whatever works for one student might not work for another. And again, just reinforcing that point that Paul Nation, the researcher, has made, that to acquire language, you have to experience that language many, many times, reading it, writing it, listening to it, translating it, if that language is to stick in your heads and you're able then to use it accurately. So if we just teach something once, or students just learn something once, they're not likely to acquire it. So a multisensory, a multi-skill, multidisciplinary approach, any ways that work well with our students are good with me.
Thank you, because that's actually very interesting, because usually, the students, depending on my experience, they feel a little bit sad that they cannot speak just because they read it once and they can't remember. But this could be a nice theory behind it, because so we have another question related to this. What's the linguist's name again?
So Paul Nation, he's the University of Wellington in New Zealand, and he's done a lot of research on vocabulary in particular.
Thank you. Perfect. And yeah, exactly. So they might be, feel a little bit sad or demotivated just because they cannot maybe remember some words from the very beginning, which is not always the case, because as we learned today, it has to be from 9 to 20 times. So, we need time. Everyone needs time.
That's right.
I have actually another question that I think might be the last one, because we have like 2 minutes left. This just out of curiosity. So since you studied lots of foreign languages as well, what was your feeling when you used English when studying a foreign language?
To be honest, I was quite relieved, quite happy to have that support. I think I would have been lost many times, especially when I learned Arabic, which was completely new to me and so different from English. If they'd only used Arabic all the time, I think I might have drowned in the lesson a little bit. So it was reassuring at times when they used it. But equally, they kind of reduced the amount of English they used. And that built up my confidence that, now actually I understand a lot more. And it goes back to the skill of the teacher. If the teacher can avoid long explanations in English, but use visuals, mime, gestures, routine language that I was familiar with, and they come back and use it again and simplify it, then I didn't need English so much to support me. So that's our job as the teacher, really, to make sure that we are pitching the level of our English to the right level of our students and supporting with all those ideas and strategies that I've mentioned.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just one little comment from me. We do have Actually, I didn't mention it at the beginning just because I wanted to show you now. Jonathan is also a teacher trainer at NILE, and we have a partnership with them as Macmillan Education and Mondadori Education. So should you be interested in having a look at that website or getting a course, we have a 25% discount. There's a QR code over here. So but please use these moments to just have a look at that. And if you have any questions, you can obviously ask us and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Jonathan, for today's session. Extremely
Good luck in your classes, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. We have to go back to our classes with maybe some more details on using mother tongue, but I actually feel the same as you, because when I was studying Chinese, when I used Italian, sometimes I was relieved, but other times I wanted to use Chinese more. So usually we really need to balance. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot. And if you have questions, we're here. So do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. And thanks again, Jonathan.
Goodbye.